Welcome back to the Open Wide the Doors podcast here at the St. John Paul II Parish. We're talking about a vocation that many of us see at Mass but may not fully understand, the diaconate. So what is a deacon? How is a deacon different than a priest? What's the difference between a permanent deacon and a transitional deacon? All of these questions we're going to dive into today. So we're grateful to be joined today by Deacon Bill Wakefield from our parish to help us unpack what it means to discern the diaconate and serve the church in this unique and beautiful way. So, Deacon, thank you for being here with us.
My privilege. Thank you.
Yeah. So, before we start getting into talking about what a deacon really is, and when did you first begin to sense that God may be calling you to the diaconate?
I really thought about that question, and I can tell you that I was fairly new as a Catholic, so I was a convert, and we'd been moved to Germany, and I'd been involved in the Cursillo movement of the Catholic Church, and I was actually the rector on a men's weekend in Regensburg, Germany, where we had been reassigned. And my spiritual advisor at the time was Father Joe Lemire, and he had invited somebody from one of his parishes to come, and he brought his father with him. Actually, it was his father-in-law, and the father-in-law was introduced to me as deacon. And I turned to Father Joe, and I said, "What's a deacon?" And he said, "Well, it's a man that helps with liturgy. He teaches, he visits people, he takes care of some problems that we might have, and he's the best helper I know. You might want to think about being one of them." So Father Joe Lemire directed me in that direction, and as I was getting ready to transfer back to the United States, I actually had a scholarship to go to college, so I looked for a place where the diaconate was vibrant, at least by reports. And it turned out there was a great place in Richmond, Virginia, and I wanted to go to college at William and Mary, just within that diocese. So I chose William and Mary to go to school because I thought I could be preparing to become a deacon there. When we arrived, I told my pastor, and he said, "Well, the bishop just did away with that program a couple of years ago, but I'll set you up with an appointment." So Cheryl and I went to an appointment with Bishop Sullivan, who is the bishop in Richmond Diocese. And after about an hour or so, he said, "I think there's something about this. I'm going to approve you to do directed discernment for the next couple of years while you're in college. And if it works out, I'll send a letter along with you when you're transferred." When I transferred, he wrote a magnificent letter to Cardinal Hickey, who immediately allowed me to join their deacon formation program in Washington, D.C. So that's how I got there.
That's really cool. So it started off in Germany and then went to Virginia.
And then went to Washington.
Wow. That's really cool.
So I didn't take it any further. We just had a conversation. He asked me a bunch of questions about my own faith and about how I become Catholic. Why did I become Catholic? Why was I so interested in the program? And why did I want to be a deacon? I mean, I had some young kids at the time. They were preschoolers at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so he was a little concerned about that. Cheryl was very supportive, apprehensive, but supportive. And he knew I was going to be in college. He says, "There's going to be a lot of demand on you in college because there's a master's program." And I said, I can handle it. He says, "I think you can."
That's really cool. That's really cool. So you've been a deacon for quite some time now.
This is 37 years, just past April.
Wow. Well, congratulations. We appreciate your service, and that's really cool. That's the influence that you have had from all of the different priests in the bishop, and the support that letter that you received or helped you to get
This
into
has been
programs.
a good move for us. I've been in 7 dioceses. I've been able to be recognized as a permanent deacon in 7 different dioceses since I was
Wow.
ordained. Because moving around in the army and then moving around with a corporate job, I had to move, and I always wanted to serve the church.
Yeah, that's really cool. So do they not automatically recognize you as a deacon in other dioceses, or do you have to
They do. Once you're a deacon, you're always a deacon. So
Okay.
It's not like I lose my diaconate standing, but you are also never going to be independent of the diocesan church. So every time I move, I have to get a letter of standing from Washington, and I'm still incarnated, and that's another question, another time. But I have to get a letter of good standing from them and then have that sent to the bishop or archbishop of the diocese I'm going to. Then they will have to review it. Usually I'm given an interview. I had a panel interview a couple of times with other deacons and priests that would just ask questions, and then they would give their recommendation. And here, I had to get a background check, and I had to get qualified, make sure I was qualified with all the Protect Children programs. And I now have 3 programs that I keep up with every month
Wow.
because I still am incarnated in Washington, D.C., and they require me to do their program. There's a program out of Kentucky that was different than the one that's here. So I keep up with that one because I do. And then the one here is different. So
you're ready to go wherever you end up going.
At this point, I'm not going anywhere else.
Well, we appreciate that you're saying, because you do so much for our parish. We appreciate all that you do.
Thanks.
So let's get into talking about what a deacon is. Like, what is a deacon?
Well, first of all, a deacon is a permanent ministry and clerical state. So it's actually the entry for all clerics into the clerical state. The bishop, the archbishop, all the cardinals, all the priests, all became deacons first. It's a permanent. There's an indelible mark placed on our souls that's recognize a character, and we're always going to be a deacon. Now, I'm a permanent deacon, which means I'm going to stay a deacon because I don't have the qualifications to become a priest because I'm married. So, a bishop friend of mine once told me, he says, the church will ordain a married man, but will never marry an ordained man. So once we're ordained, married. So there's a permanent deacon and a transitional deacon. Permanent deacon is one who's married usually. There are some that are not married, but they also have to comport with the celibacy requirement of the transitional deacon. Transitional deacons are intentionally moving towards priesthood. So when they're ordained a deacon, they take a vow of chastity and celibacy, and then they go on for the rest of the program, the rest of their seminary to go on to become a priest. I stay a permanent. So I've been a permanent deacon for 37 years.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I don't think I knew that you could, if you were ordained a deacon before you got married, you're not allowed to be married.
Yeah,
afterwards.
It's even if Cheryl passes away, God please no. But if my spouse or a permanent deacon spouse precedes them in death, they're committed to celibacy. And you cannot remarry.
That's really cool. That shows like the hierarchy of the orders,
Right.
The vows that you make.
Right.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, there's so much about the diaconate that it's like you don't really, for a lay person who just who attends mass and sees the deacons at mass and helping out. I definitely don't know as much as I should, I guess.
One of the things about a deacon, a priest, you're never going to be unattached. You're on ordination, you are attached to a diocese, and it's called incarnated. And I remain incarnated in Washington, D.C. That's who has jurisdictional authority over me as a deacon. Now, when I move here, I have the obligation to comport with Archbishop Casey and the rules of this diocese. But if I have canonical issues that require adjudication at trial, I have to go back to DC because that's where that accountability will be held.
Interesting.
So you're never unattached. There's no freelance deaconing. There's no, you're not allowed to go out and set up a wagon and say, here I am, I've got all the answers.
Well, that's the same. Is that the same with priests too? Like priests?
They're incarnated also because they're a deacon first.
Yeah.
So they're incarnated as a deacon. And if you want to go from one diocese to another, even a priest can do that, but it requires the permission of the bishop of your incarnation to do that. I have to ask Washington, D.C. if I can come here. And then when I get here, I have to make sure that I get the permission of the archdiocese here, the archbishop here, to function. And he will give me faculties, which gives me the privilege then of serving a parish as a deacon. And sometimes they don't give you all the faculties until you've kind of given a little bit of proof of who you are or how you. So there's been an occasion where for 6 months I was told I wasn't allowed to preach, but I'd gotten faculties to preach when I was ordained. So for 6 months in one location, I was not allowed to preach. And then the pastor went and said, he seems to be okay. I got faculties to preach. So here I was given the faculties to preach as part of the assignment to this parish. And I'm assigned to a parish. So I'm not just I wasn't like a parishioner. A deacon's not going to be like a parishioner, just signing up because you like where the church is, and you like where the people are, and you want to be part of this. Actually, you were assigned to a parish. I went in and interviewed with Father Fox when I got here and said, I'd like to be here. I have family that attends church in this parish. And he accepted me and gave his endorsement to the Archbishop, and the Archbishop gave me the assignment here.
So you could be assigned, like, if you live in this area, could you be assigned to a place, like a church, like, farther away from you?
Could, certainly could.
Hmm.
Usually with a permanent deacon with a family and all that, there's a certain amount of courtesy given to the deacon as to where they live and maybe where they work and how that happens. Far less mobility expectations as a transitional deacon or priest would have. I actually have the obligation to return to Washington, D.C. if somehow they would want to have me back.
Mm.
I would be obligated to make that consideration. And now at my age, I can declare I'm senior now. Well, but I really don't want to surrender to that title.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so
you're
that's how much attention and authority we have between the ranks of the orders.
okay, interesting. I didn't know any of that. So I'm learning a lot. This is pretty cool. So, you've been talking about the transitional deacons and permanent deacons. What is the difference between the 2?
Primarily, it's gonna revolve oftentimes around the fact that one is married, one is not. A transitional deacon has the intention of becoming a priest, which requires the vow of celibacy. A permanent deacon can be married or not married. If he's not married, he can then also take the vow of celibacy and can never marry. It goes back to that question, that discussion we had earlier where my former bishop had said that the church will certainly ordain a married man, but never marry an ordained man.
Mm, mhm.
So yeah, we're under the obligations of the archbishop, and it's the same as a transitional deacon or permanent deacon. We have the same faculties usually, although I understand in some places the faculty for preaching doesn't come automatically with ordination. And here in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, there's an additional after ordination, there's an additional period where the new deacon goes through a formative homiletics program. So
Okay.
ours was ingrained in our program in DC. So we had homiletics every semester and then had practicums every year on homiletics. So
So how long is the program here in the Archdiocese for homiletics?
homiletics, it's about a year, I think. Right now, Deacon Chris Jasek is going through that program right now. And he's doing preaching at Good Hope, and there's a requirement to have a priest and then a group of laity give him feedback after he
Mm,
preaches. So, and I don't know all the details of the program, but there's probably some classes on exegesis, how to formulate, how to pray with the Gospels and the Scriptures to prepare a homily.
okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know how you would teach that. Or I feel like that can be kind of difficult to learn, to like learn how to understand the gospel and be able to actually relay what the gospel is saying and teach in a
Well,
sense to this.
it does require a lot of scriptural study and awareness, a lot of
Mm,
history, church history, doctrinal. So one of the things, deacons and priests, bishops, cardinals, we all have an ongoing formation expectation. So we're never to be, never sit back on our laurels. There's always something to learn.
mm,
But also in homiletics, there's techniques that we were taught how to formulate a good way to address the questions, and how to do the exegesis. How does it all fit together? What was, instead of reading just the few verses you have presented at the mass, maybe you read ahead and in front of the gospel. You try to find the archetypes that are in the Old Testament as well. So you
mm,
can't there's a lot of pieces can be put together because what's revealed in the New Testament has been shown or foretold in the Old Testament. So there's
mhm,
usually a real important part of our preparation is to build those connections and then connect it all to the church context of our society, the church context in its doctrine. So, yeah. And
yeah,
I love to preach.
yeah.
I do.
So how often do you get to preach?
Right now, we're on a cycle. The third Sunday of every month, the deacons will preach at all of the masses. So
Wow.
now that doesn't mean all of us preach at every mass, but one of the deacons will preach at all the masses at a given church.
So you get to preach once a month, and
Yes, usually because of other obligations, I've not been able to preach this last month. Will not be able to preach this coming month because I have obligations that will take me out of state.
well, we look forward to hearing you preach in
Sure,
August.
sure.
So, what does the commitment look like for the permanent and transitional deacons?
It probably is a little bit more flexible with the deacon that's married, the permanent deacon,
Mhm.
because we were taught a hierarchy of our priorities. God is first, family is second, job because that supports family, then the diaconate, and yourself.
Interesting.
So that set of priorities for a permanent deacon that's married means you've got to spend, all of us have spent a lot of time developing our interior life and our relationship and our living, our being as a relationship to God. But then we have to maintain that same intensity of the marital relationship, that sacramental bond that we
Mhm.
have with our wives and in our children. And then we have to be able to provide support because
Mhm.
the church is not obligated. And in most cases, most deacons never receive any compensation for their work in the church.
Mm.
And there's an exception if you have a position in the church. I'd been a CFO at one point, and I got paid as the CFO for a diocese. But most of my 37 years, there's been no remuneration for my services. So,
That's interesting that the diaconate is that low. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that like God first, family second, and then your job, and then the diaconate. But I don't know. For some reason, I thought it would be like put a little bit higher. But as you're pointing out all of the
well,
lists,
I
it makes sense that
my first obligation as a person was to be in relationship with God.
yes, and that makes total
Then I
sense.
found this beautiful woman that I married, and I've got a permanent obligation to her.
Hmm.
Then there was the children that sort of have an obligation to them. So that's how the hierarchy kind of works out,
Yeah.
which is another reason why celibacy seems to make sense sometimes because I have a lot of situations where I'd like to be doing something, but I have priorities with family. Just a few weeks ago, I think it was the week we were supposed to be preaching. My obligation was to be with a family reunion in Pennsylvania, so I was not in the state. And the obligation was this was really a once in a lifetime reunion that we had. There was 100 people became
Wow.
present. So to miss that would have been a disappointment, not to me as much as it would be for the obligations I hold to my family. And it was a good time, but I did miss being here.
You miss preaching.
Well, I miss being here
Yeah.
because I didn't get to go visit the sick that week.
Mm.
I didn't get to talk to people that I worked with on their issues and their family and their times. Yeah, I mean, I love being a deacon. I love the whole thought and the whole gifts of being deacon.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And
Uh,
none of my family, because none of my family are Catholic. So
yeah. Yeah, you've mentioned that before that you're, from Baptist, right?
yeah, well, I grew up in military chapels with almost exclusively Baptist preachers, Baptist
Mm.
ministers. But I was actually, don't tell anybody, but I was actually baptized a Methodist. So Baptists never knew that, I think.
So we talked about the kind of the commitment of the permanent and transitional deacons.
Right.
How long does it take to become a deacon?
It really depends on your diocese or your archdiocese that you're in, the preparation period. It's gotten much more rigorous than it was back when I became a deacon, back in gosh, it seems like a long time ago. The directed discernment that Bishop Sullivan instructed for me was really meeting with my pastor at the time for 5 hours each Friday morning. And we went through scripture, we went through history, we went through encyclicals, a lot of questions, a lot of dialogue, a lot of discernment of why am I wanting to pursue this, and his judgment and his assessment of my progress and the
Mm.
authenticity of my desires, the source of my desires being the Holy Spirit and God's intentions for me. So that was that I don't think most people get that privilege of having that directed discernment period as much. Some of the parishes, some of the dioceses have very strong academic programs where they. I know in Kentucky they use the St. Meinrad. There's a friend of mine who's in charge of a program up here in Columbus, but also they do deacon formation programs for dioceses around the country. Here, it's done at the seminary down in Anderson Township area at the seminary. And there's a 2-year academic where they spend time with an academic program and then they go through 3 years of the deacon formation program.
Mm-mm.
It's a very comprehensive period. So I actually had 7 years total formation time.
Wow.
Most go 5 years, but because of the added discernment time that I was offered from Bishop Sullivan, I ended up with 7 total years. And then there's an ongoing requirement. So
Yeah.
no matter which diocese I've been actually physically in, I have to make an annual report as to what I'm doing to continue my formation throughout the year. Usually it's a year-end report. It talks about the activities and the studies that you've been engaged in. So
Interesting. So you have that commitment to make sure that you are continuing your education.
continuing the growth and yeah.
Wow, wow, that's really cool. I think this was brought up in one of the episodes that we've talked about before, or we've had before. But I think everybody could benefit a lot from having some sort of commitment to
Accountability.
accountability to make sure that you are working on improving your faith life and your education and all of that each year, and it's not just I need to try and pray more kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Too often we see points in life where we progress beyond that, and we got that people always talk about. A lot of people perceive that once they get through this point, I've been confirmed. Now I don't have to do anything else, or I'm an adult now. I can do it I don't have to do all the formation. I don't have to continue my education.
Mhm.
That's why what Christa does here and tries to build programs and opportunities for growth, at least in seasonal sequences where you spend time understanding and learning why we have these different programs and teachings in the church. It's very important to continue your growth, continue your
Yeah.
education. It really develops a more intimate relationship with God. It calls us to a friendship level, a union of His life with our life, and it needs to be an intimacy that just is intense. And
Yeah.
most of us, I would say, I shouldn't categorize anybody, but a lot of us think, well, if I pray about 10 minutes in the morning, or I remember meal prayers, I'm doing fine. I spend 2 hours every morning,
Mhm.
and scripture, prayer intentions as well. And then I sit and listen. And what's God telling me in these scriptures I just read?
Mhm.
I read the daily readings for the church. And what's God telling me in that? And really listening, doing an exam. And I have a 2-question exam that I try to focus on. The first question is, what in the last 24 hours did I have an opportunity to witness God to another? And did I take an advantage of it? How did that work?
Mm.
The second question is a little more difficult. What in that previous 24-hour period did I have an opportunity to witness for God and help another, and I didn't do it? And that really does help you really center yourself in what your priorities and where your time is.
Yeah, for sure. That question, those are really good questions to bring to your prayer life. And the second one, what opportunities did you have and not,
Did I miss?
yeah, you didn't act on, or you missed, and that's a big thing too. I mean, I think there's a lot of times when we do our examination of conscience, a lot of times we look at the things that we did wrong, but we miss the things that we could have done that we didn't do.
What I've done and what I failed to.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool.
St. Francis de Sales once said that every Christian should spend at least 30 minutes in prayer every day. And if you're real busy, make it an hour.
Yeah, I think it was I heard this Saint Teresa of Calcutta. She said and her missions down there, the sisters or the nuns that were working there with her were like, "We need to cut down our prayer time because we don't have
'Cause we
enough
need
time to
do
serve
all
all
this
of
work.
these people." And she's like, she doubled their prayer time just because that's the most important thing to do.
It's at number 1.
Yeah,
It's that God priority.
yeah. And taking time to remind ourselves that God is the number one priority. It can be challenging to remember that, but it is so true, and we definitely need to examine our lives and make sure that we are figuring out our priorities are set straight and God is first.
Right.
So what are some things the deacons are able to do outside of their responsibilities at Mass? Because at
There's a
Mass,
lot. There's a plethora of opportunities. I guess I could start, well, we assist at Mass. We don't serve Mass, we assist at Mass.
okay,
And in assisting at Mass, we proclaim the gospel. We're to proclaim the petitions. We do occasionally, we'll have more than occasionally sometimes, we serve the penitential rite. So it's usually the deacon here and does the penitential rite at Mass, except during Lent and oftentimes during Advent, where we do the Confiteor, where the priest will lead that. I also have the privilege of officiating and witnessing marriages outside of the Mass. So if a couple comes and they want to get married without a Mass, I'm able to do the preparation and the ritual service that is outside of Mass. I do visitations to the sick, which is one of my most favorite obligations and experiences. I don't have quite a cadre here. There was 32 people that I would visit in my last diocese every
wow,
week.
wow,
And the hardest week of my life was the time I had to go around and tell all of them that I was not coming back because you really got close to them. So that's a couple of the other things. I love doing baptisms, especially infant baptisms. I love helping families prepare for that as well as doing the rite. I think there's other things that I can do that deacons are allowed to do. I do annulments. Help people prepare their submission for the tribunal. I work with the Cursillo movement. So Cursillo is it's Cursillo de Cristiad. It's a movement in the Catholic Church. It started in the 1940s, and it started in Spain and has migrated throughout now the world. 1957, I think it was. It came to the United States.
okay,
Cincinnati was actually one of the first English-speaking Cursillos because it had been in Spanish prior to that. And I'm a spiritual director. The Cursillo de Cristiad is really Cursillo means short course in Christianity. So it's a 3-day program that we go through with men and women separately, but then we have a lot of functionality after that weekend experience with others, both men and women. But it's actually the process by which I was brought into the Catholic Church. I went to my first Cursillo without being Catholic. Father Joe Lemire, the priest I talked about
hmm,
earlier, and my wife had decided that it might help me. So I went with some reluctance, but after the first morning of the experience, I knew I had to become Catholic. And that really is so. I'm very much involved and committed to the Cursillo methodology. And in fact, I just did a men's weekend a couple of weeks back, and I'm going to be doing the women's weekend in August as a spiritual advisor for them. I sit on the secretariat, the Archdiocesan Secretariat for Cursillo as well.
yeah. So it's a retreat for people who want to
It's
become
not a
Catholic.
re- it's not a retreat. It's not even a conversion. It's supposed to be an enrichment, and it's not. But it's not a retreat. It's a
Okay,
short course in Christianity.
okay.
So you'll hear lay people, laymen, and lay women giving witnesses and talks on topics. Spiritual advisors, whether it be a deacon or a priest, will also give talks on that. And then you sit in small groups and you discuss and you process and do a lot of prayer time together, do a lot of sacraments. We have mass every day. We have morning prayer, evening prayer, a lot of fellowship. A
But
lot.
this is for people who aren't Catholic, who are
You're supposed to be Catholic.
oh, okay,
That's why I was so
okay,
unusual because I wasn't Catholic.
okay,
I was violating rules.
okay, okay. Well, interesting. I'll have to do more research into that. I've never heard of it before. So I'm kind of intrigued now.
Good, good.
Yeah.
I know our pastor has some Cursillo experience too.
Oh, yeah?
So yeah, he told me he was once very involved with the Cursillo movement.
Wow. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I definitely will look into that a little bit more. So back to the deacons. How does your vocation as a husband and a father intersect with your vocation as a deacon? We talked about the hierarchy, but is there any intertwining with that?
Well, it really depends on the deacon and the spouse. In my case, Cheryl is very supportive. She used to be very out front supportive, and now she's very much reserved. She doesn't like to get public about it. But we did that Lenten series together.
Hmm.
She helped prepare almost everything people saw except the teachings
Hmm.
and the but she did the hospitality. She she made the brochures and helped put together the material for all the people, set the environment, and she encourages me. She's probably my best recruiter. She'll recruit me for almost anything. I've done retreats because she's found the opportunity to volunteer me to be a retreat leader. So, and I enjoy doing that. So she's a very strong advocate. But I have to be careful because I have to remember the priorities. The priorities are God and family, God and wife, and not allow the diaconate to demand of my time that prevents and distracts from family and my God time. So my usually my habits have been, and I've slacked off here recently, but my tendency is to try to get up around 4:30 or 5 each morning and do my 2 hours. So it's real quiet in my house at that time.
Hmm.
But that's so that I can get my spiritual time and get my days organized according to that spiritual program. And then I have to look at the program for the family. In fact, today, my program was a little bit set aside because we had some repair and maintenance issues that I had to hang out for, and that's why I came
Hmm.
running in here at the last minute. And I have grandkids, and I have 2 daughters that live in town. Their families, swim meets, we have soccer games, we have basketball games. I have to make them a priority too, not just showing up at church. I mean, there was the mass and rosary yesterday was on my calendar, but I had to defer it because of some family issues that we're dealing with. So making those sacrifices, I can't imbalance my priorities
Hmm.
from the standards.
Interesting.
Unlike, priests have the same issues. They have obligations that they have to comport with and prioritize as well. But the family does present the higher priority for the deacon.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting that like it makes sense. It does make sense. But like I said earlier, like I never would have thought that like yeah, you have a family, but you have to prioritize your family over your diaconate. And if you have like the third weekends where you're scheduled to preach, and if you have family commitments, you have to set that aside to
Forego
like
that.
to tend to your family.
Well, and I mean, we're right now, the way I schedule myself for my deacon is I work every weekend for 3 weekends. So I will try to assist at mass at one of our churches for all the masses at that church on that given weekend. So Saturday and Sunday. St. Henry, it's all day Sunday. It's, from early in the morning till 6 at night, the masses. And then on the 4th weekend, the cycle is I ask Cheryl where she'd like to go to church. And we're new to the area, so we've been trying to go around to different churches in the Archdiocese. It's been fun because we know so little, and I have to put the I have to put the church's address in my GPS because I have no idea where I'm
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
And it's been really kind of fun to do that. And she has an affection for a particular parish, and we will go there on a fairly regular basis, but not
Yeah.
every weekend. So
Yeah. That's pretty cool that, like, you have the 3 weekends where
it's
you
3 weekends
and then
3 weekends to be a deacon in the parish, and then I'm going to be a husband and
yeah.
sit in the pew with my
Yeah, that's really cool. So, how would someone know if they're being called to the diaconate?
You really want to start out with what is your spiritual life like? How is your spiritual life impacting you? And is there a sense that you're being called to something more. One of the ways to discern that is others are encouraging you and you're getting involved. And like Father Joe Lemire says, you might want to think about being one of them. Somebody helps you along to think about that. And then your best friends, your family, asking them and listening to them. But a lot of it's silent in prayer and listening for God's direction. And it's amazing how clear that can be. There's a clarity that I had. It was not a foregone conclusion, but it was so powerful that I knew that was the direction I had to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was then reinforced by the sequence of the process, the discernment I did with Father Zahn, the priest that Bishop Sullivan gave me for the 2 years of discernment, the reinforcement of that. Friends who weren't particularly religious and many of them not Catholic would also come across with encouragements. I was in the military at the time, and I was actually in D.C. working in a think tank, and both the civilian and the military guys knew I was leaving every Tuesday and Thursday to go to classes, and they became very supportive. Well, what'd you guys do last night? What was the program what was the experience you had this last weekend? And so all of those encouragements are signposts and indicators that you're probably on a good trajectory. The last part is the official discernment that's going to take place by the church itself. If members of your parish, members of your religious circles that you travel with, if they discourage you, it's probably not a good signal.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of those things that says, hey, maybe I need to be thinking about something else. But it really starts with your own spiritual life. And if you don't take those 2 hours or that 30-minute or 1 hour, St. Francis de Sales talks about, if you don't take that time to be with God, you're never going to. So
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is. Our prayer life is so important. And how are we to discern anything if we don't have the time, if we don't take the time to take it to the Lord?
Ask Him.
Yeah.
Ask Him if that's just the direction that you should go, and He'll answer. Trust Him. He'll answer.
Trust the process. It is. I think a lot of times people maybe discerning something, discerning the diaconate, discerning whatever, but they ask God or they bring it to the Lord, and then there's no answer for a period. Not necessarily no answer, but it can be. There can be periods of time where you're just I'm not hearing what God is calling me to. Like I'm debating something and I'm discerning this, but I haven't had a clear answer yet. Have you come across that problem at all?
Yes, but I don't expect a telephone call. I try to pray for the awareness and the understanding to recognize the responses.
Yeah.
So God's not going to pick up a phone, at least He hadn't for me. He's not going to pick up the phone and call me and say, Bill, I want you to do this.
Yeah.
But He may send others in your life that said, I appreciated so much what you did with my grandmother or with my sick wife or with my sick child. I think you really helped me during that terrible time. Or somebody comes up and says, Bill, I'd really like to spend time understanding scriptures better and getting a stronger interior life. Would you be willing to accompany me through regular meetings, which I also do, and help them expand their spiritual life and their growth? So it's not like God says, I want you to be a spiritual advisor. I want you to be a deacon. Why don't you be a lector and you be this? You'd make a great mother. God says wonderful things to us. He presents us with opportunities that if we're not awakened, if we're not awake and we don't allow them to awaken us, we'll miss them.
Yeah, that is so good. Yeah, you're right. God's not gonna give you a phone call. He's not gonna say exactly this is what exactly I want you to do.
And He doesn't send text messages.
Man.
Notice that too.
Yeah, that's something that I've struggled with is I want something. I want a clear-cut answer right now, and that God doesn't work like that.
Well, and there's other ways too. If you're not getting affirmation, if you're trying to pursue a goal or an aspiration and you keep hitting roadblocks or you keep being turned back, maybe there's a message there too. Maybe we need to look in a different direction. Did I want to stay in Kentucky? We were pretty comfortable in Kentucky. But we have great affection for our family. We have family now in Tennessee and here, and we have family in Texas and Pennsylvania. So the priorities became the family here. So if two daughters and 4 grandkids and a son-in-law, and I have a son-in-law and a daughter down in Tennessee and a granddaughter down there. So I needed to be close there. So here we are.
Wow.
And our house sold the first 24 hours it was on the market.
Wow.
So that was kind of an indication this is about time.
Yeah, the Lord works in mysterious ways. So, before we wrap up, why is the diaconate so important in today's church, in our church today?
I think if you go back to the history of the diaconate, it actually started in the first century. And Acts chapter 6, if you go back to read the first few verses in Acts chapter 6, you'll see that there was a need for help in serving the community. And the apostles got together and they said, well, let's pick a few good men. And they picked 7, and we became the first deacon. For years after that, the church had a permanent deacon or deacon ministry that went along. And gosh, I would say the 3rd century, it basically began to fade. And by the 5th century, the permanent diaconate was gone. It was only transitional deacons. So it only became a priesthood. But at the Council of Trent, which was really in the mid-1500s, the council actually saw that there was an emphasis needed to bring deacons back into a permanent ministry and to provide the ministry of service, not just those who were pursuing the priesthood. But if you remember your history, around the 1500s was another thing going on, kind of took over the priorities, and it was called the Reformation. And the council spent more time and had to put more resources toward the response to the Protestant Reformation, and the permanent diaconate did not get reinstituted there. But it was recognized, and it's in the documents from the Council of Trent that the permanent diaconate should be its own ministry, permanent ministry in the church. It wasn't until the 1940s when in Dachau, a group of prisoners at the Dachau concentration camp got together. There was Otto Pies and Wilhelm Schmoe. Can't pronounce his name, sorry. They began to see the need during the time of trials and tribulation that there needed to be an order of deacons, permanent deacons, that could serve the people in the church, especially in times of persecution and times of adversities. Because oftentimes the priests, at that time, if you remember your history, a lot of the priests were arrested and imprisoned. So it would have been the deacon, the permanent deacon, who had a family and lived separately, independently of the church, not the hierarchy, but the church structure, could then provide a lot of the outreach and a lot of the ministries to the people. Even after the war, they continued that dialogue with deacon circles, and deacon circles would be gatherings of priests and other religious who would sit around and talk about how the diaconate could be formed. And not until the 3rd session of the Vatican Council, Vatican II, did they adopt the restoration of the permanent deacon. So that was in 1959, 1964. That period of time was where all that restoration happened. And it was, let's see if I look here in my note here a little bit, it was Pope Paul VI that reestablished it with his apostolic letter in June of 1967. Today, 39% of the world's deacons, permanent deacons, are in the United States. So why is it important? Because culture today is still not favoring church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you stop and think about our culture today, there are a lot remains in our culture that creates anti-church responses. I can be in places that a priest would not be as welcome because I don't present myself as a threat as some people would perceive. I also have the ability to work when I was a corporate officer, when I was a military officer, I was also working among other that oftentimes priests don't get as easy an access to. There was a saying that I've written down. I can't find it in my notes here, but the church doesn't need to comply with the world. We need to change the world. So the deacon has the ability to be in places where the church would be rejected or shunned or maybe eliminated.
Yeah.
Think about what's going on in Africa, what's going on around the world, and some of the communities where other religions are asserting themselves with physical violence and persecutions. Not so much in the States, but although here in the United States, we have our own issues with the decline in membership, decline in attendance, the destruction of what once would have been sacred thoughts and processes and values.
Yes.
So a deacon has a unique ability to intersect on those.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, we definitely need each of us has, in a sense, a responsibility to share our beliefs with the people that we interact in our day-to-day lives. And the deacons, it makes sense that the deacons also have an obligation like that to bring the church to areas in our culture and people in our culture who aren't necessarily who are very knowledgeable in our beliefs and be
And
against some of our values and stuff like
I
that.
mean, the fact that we do go through the formative process of developing ourselves and our responsibilities and knowing scripture and knowing doctrine and having the faculties to serve and administer baptism, for example. We priests exclusively do the sacrament of reconciliation, the sacrament of penance, and anointing. Those are exclusive to the priest, and that
Mhm.
which means the cardinal, the bishop, and the priest. The deacon is excluded in those, but we can participate in almost any of the other sacraments. I've done a number of burials, done
Mhm.
a number of funerals. So it's a service that the deacon can offer when priests are in shorter supply or when there are no priests. I spent a tour the entire time we were in Saudi Arabia in Desert Storm. I spent the entire time there commanding a medical unit, but I also did 6 or 7 times a week a communion service, ward and
Mhm.
communion service. I had an Air Force priest that would consecrate hosts for me, and I would carry them forward to the Iraq border. And then I would visit units, not just my own, but units around the area. I was called to do prayers over the dead when an A-10 pilot crashed on the airfield that were near where
Wow.
we were. So deacons do have opportunities to be places where perhaps others are not.
That's really cool. That's so cool. I mean, I had no idea all that deacons have the ability to do, and it's your ministry is so powerful, and it's so important to our culture and our society just to have people who can come out into
Just
yeah.
and also just knowing that it's permanent. I
Yeah.
mean, this is not I'm not a deacon tomorrow, but not one the next day. It's who I am. It's now character. It's a indelible character mark that God
Mhm.
has placed on my soul. And I I feel an obligation to that service. And I'm affirmed by encounters with you. And there are some people who say, what an idiot you are. You know, I mean, you could have a beach house, you could do this, you could do that. No, I don't feel called to that life.
Yeah.
And the notion that we're assigned to a parish or to a particular ministry also causes you to really make a choice to surrender because yeah, I'd like to be somewhere sometimes that no, I'm scheduled to be at this parish now. I'm obligated. I want to be there, but I also have that obligation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool.
Nice warm day like today, I'd be out in the golf course. I'm sitting here with somebody with a microphone in front of me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming here, and it's a hot one today, so I don't know, I would be outside, but the diaconate is such a beautiful witness of service and humility and love for the church. So if you or somebody you know has ever wondered about discerning the diaconate, we encourage you to speak with one of our priests or deacons and begin that conversation. Please keep praying for vocations to the priesthood, to the diaconate, to marriage, and to religious life. The church flourishes when people generously say yes to God. Until next time, God bless.